And they said, well, we might have this positioning opening up in a few months that would be kind of like an interfaith position or to connect to the Christian community. Would you be interested in doing that if it did? And I said, at the time, I'm really eager to get
Yeah.
a job in this field. And I said, sure. And I think that was a choice that really altered the trajectory of my life completely. No, this is a serious danger. This is a serious vulnerability. I know that it is because I exploited it. I'm the one that did it. The deputy CG at the time, he was literally like listening to this and he goes, these people give me the fucking creeps. He said that probably like 1 hour before going in front of like 1,000 or however many thousands of people and saying, oh, Israel prays for peace and all this stuff we leave you support we so much.
Yeah.
Like these aren't just accusations, these are confessions. Like I have seen how easy it is to get decent people to do bad things with religion because I've done it. So you tell yourself, like, I don't have a choice because it's this or I'm unemployed. And like there's things that are worse than being unemployed. Like I'm not gonna starve to death. And there are people who actually are starving to death, and I'm helping to kind of wrap that up in a Judeo-Christian bow. And it's sickening.
Dilemma Podcast, Jay Shapiro here. Quick reminder that I started a little membership program, which is a way to support me and the channel, of course, but also a way to thank you and do something more collaborative where if you become a member the last Sunday of every month, I'm doing a members only live stream, 12 Eastern on the last Sunday of every month, where I want to learn from you and share ideas and come hang out. And so it would be awesome to see some of you there. And then I have a little bit of a different conversation for you today. So with a guy named Brandt who reached out to me a couple months ago in an email with a really interesting story that you're going to hear. He ended up taking a job about, I think it's 8 years ago, with the Israeli Consulate of the southeast of America in Houston, Texas. And he got a window onto a world that he's going to walk you through. He's clearly going through his own journey intellectually and emotionally with this entire process. And I'll just sort of let him tell his story, which is really interesting and gets into Christian Zionism and all kinds of things that he felt and witnessed. I've wanted to do a show on Christian Zionism in a while, and I do have a scholar and author named Melanie McAllister lined up, who I'm talking to next month, that I'm really excited about. She's written 3 books, including a recent one called Promises, which is Gaza after October 7th. But she, is a scholar who goes through that stuff. But Brandt lived through something and really can give a window. So I had a lot of fun collecting a lot of clips from things that he references. So you're going to see a lot of clips of Christian Zionism and televangelists and certain things that he helped arrange himself. So hopefully you enjoy those and get a lot out of those. It helped me sort of contextualize a lot of his story. And then I also, a little bit of a trigger warning, we do talk about October 7th in a pretty detailed way, you'll see why, and some of the violence there. And I am going to come back at the end with a little afterthought on the subject of extreme violence and humanization, and this thing I've been wanting to talk about a lot lately of humanizing violence. So I'll just let it play now. This is a conversation with Brandt Burleson that I think you'll get a lot out of. It was really interesting just to converse with him and hear his story and get this insight into his view on it. I think it took a lot of bravery for him to do so, and so see me at the end for a little revisit of a conversation, a few thoughts I have on humanizing violence, enjoy Brandt Burleson. I don't even know how you're thinking of yourself these days as like, it's not really like a whistleblower. You're not like calling out secrets and corruption. It's more like you got a window into this world and you want to sort of share.
Yeah. I would maybe useful idiot is the best term that kind of realized what was happening. And whistleblower is not the right term because all of it was mostly public anyway. I mean, there's a few like behind the scenes things that are somewhat interesting, or some of them that are kind of funny. But I guess that's how I would describe myself.
Yeah. Well, let's go through your introduction of just even start with like your upbringing and maybe if you were exposed to religion and religious teaching, or sort of if Israel was
Yeah,
even a thing. Yeah, take me through sort of who you are.
I grew up here in Texas, mostly in Waco, so a town that was kind of existed in the national consciousness because of a siege with the cult. So like religion's always kind of been a present factor in my life, but always in an interesting way. So my dad was a pastor growing up in a pretty like moderate to progressive denomination. It was the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. So I was, a pastor's kid, um, from that kind of more moderate or even like mystic kind of background in a sea of like conservative Christianity. And then, I was never interested in like following in those footsteps exactly. I mean, I called myself a Christian, but it wasn't super the focus of my life. Like when I went to college, I was deciding whether to major in music or major in political science, and I just chose the political science job route, thinking, "Oh yeah, there'll be plenty of jobs in political science." And that, but then I took an international relations course as part of that, and decided, "Oh, I like this a lot more than domestic politics. I think it's way more interesting." uh, and then went on to get a master's in international relations. And then I eventually, graduated with a mountain of student loan debt. I moved back to Texas. I got married. Eventually, I worked a series of like jobs. I worked at a museum here part-time. Most of my focus in grad school actually was on South Asia and Southeast Asia as opposed to the Middle East. I worked at Domino's and Pizza Hut after having a master's degree. And I was just thinking, I remember thinking, if I could only find a decently paying job that was in my field, I would be happy and satisfied. And I kind of look back at now as a be careful what you wish for moment.
And what year was
Because
this around when you're
okay,
Domino's?
so I graduated grad school in 2013.
Gotcha.
Um, and then I should mention I was a pretty serious alcoholic for a long time. I haven't had a drink in years. And that was also interesting because if you know anything about like AA programs, they are sort of predicated on a belief in a higher power.
Yeah.
Uh, so if when you're become an atheist eventually, like that doesn't really work for you. Anyway, so and then in 2016, I uh, I applied for a job to work as like an executive assistant in a consulate, and it didn't even say which one because I now see because of security reasons. And
And
so I showed
where
up for
was
that.
the ad posted? It was just like
It was
online.
on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I applied for that position and got the call to do the interview. And they ended up going with someone else for that position. But I remember I was talking with the CG at the time. So just for the listeners who might not know the vernacular, like a consul general is the position, and the consulate general is the building itself. So in a country as big as the United States that covers that much area and that many people, a consulate is sort of like a miniature embassy. So we covered Texas, New Mexico, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and then for a while Kansas. And anyways, during the interview, the consul general asked me just randomly, "Oh, well, what did your parents do when you were growing up?" And I mentioned that my dad was a pastor, and so he says, "Oh, so you probably know a little more like about the denominations and the Christian world than most people." And I said, "Yeah, probably more than most people do, I would say." And they said, "Well, we might have this positioning opening up in a few months that would be kind of like an interfaith position or to connect to the Christian community. Would you be interested in doing that if it did?" And I said, at the time, I'm really eager to get
Yeah.
a job in this field. And I said, "Sure." And I think that was a choice that really altered the trajectory of my life
Wow.
completely. And so I got that call later and joined. And I foolishly at the time thought, okay, this is mostly going to be, promoting religious tourism to holy sites. And I was like, oh, that sounds, pretty innocuous. And I can use this as like a stepping stone to the next thing. I'll just do this for a year. I didn't really understand the whole how. twisted and weird the world of Christian Zionism was until I started doing the job. And I was the first person to have the job. So I had to build out everything from scratch. The most cynical, or actually probably the most accurate version of what I did was it was my job primarily to exploit people's religious beliefs and to push them and to get them to push their elected officials to like unconditional support for the Israeli government. And we would use, all sorts of scripture and remarks and meetings to do this. So like Genesis 12:3 was something I was constantly putting into speeches. That's the verse that says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you.
It is an honor for me to stand here in front of you all as the Consul General of the State of Israel. Thank you. She, just like each and every one of you, believes in the holiness of the family. She and you share the same values. She is Israeli and you are Americans. Both of you stand shoulder to shoulder in making our planet a better place. In behalf of the State of Israel, I salute to Pastor Hagee and this wonderful congregation for supporting and standing by Israel, the Jewish people. Hallelujah to you all. Amen to the eternity of our two great nations. God bless America. God bless the State of Israel. Thank you very much.
In a lot of these, it's not like I'm not that clever. Like a lot of these people pretty much threw themselves at me. So I'm not trying to like oversell my own manipulation skills here. But yeah, and I was constantly getting feedback from my bosses. I served under 3 consul generals over 8.5 years, and it was never, hey, tone it down on the religious language. It was always put more scripture in it, put more focus more on that, more on this.
So
This is what we want.
let me slow you down to understand exactly what these, like what and where these communications were. Was this like you were putting on, I mean, you sent me some of the stuff, is interesting. You were putting on like events at churches or meetings or public facing things, or you were just sending out flyers and communication? Like where was that verse landing? All of that stuff. Okay.
Yeah. So my first instinct was to create like a big database of all the mega churches in the country. And they really wanted me to also focus on mainline Protestant churches because the evangelicals were largely kind of already doing everything that Israel wanted them to do. So over time, that database became enormous. Like I've tracked thousands and thousands of people or organizations. Most all the events that we ended up doing were pretty much like little pep rallies for Israel. And so they would be at churches usually, sometimes other places. We would often like if you've ever seen the Night to Honor Israel, it's an annual event at Cornerstone Church. John Hagee's the pastor there.
It is an honor to be here with you today to what has become a yearly highlight for so many of us. I would like to thank Pastor John Hagee and Pastor Diana Hagee for all you have done throughout decades to bring together Christian and Jewish communities. It is difficult to overstate just how influential you have been in planting the seeds of love for Israel for what has become millions of Christian Zionists. CUFI, Christians United for Israel.
And I knew it was an uphill project we were on. But I was thoroughly convinced to the depth of my soul that it would please the Lord to bless the Jewish people and the state of Israel. And now Christians United for Israel has 10 million, almost 11 million people in these United States that are registered by voting district, state by state, region by region, to go to Washington, D.C. and face our elected officials and say, we stand with Israel and we want you to stand with Israel and we're holding you accountable for it.
So a lot of it was kind of modeled off of that, and just kind of take that model and do it at this church or this church or this church. Always the size of the church was usually the most important thing. But then I would usually go beforehand and meet with these individuals one-on-one, and then if it was important enough, bring the CG with me. And like one of the tactics I would use is I would try to get them to like come up with the idea themselves instead of me suggesting it. But also, like, I had a series of questions that I would usually ask everyone, like, what are some of the, biggest Christian media things that you watch, or what are, how do you appeal to young people? What do you see as the trajectory of your denomination or your church or Christianity in the region? Also, like I mentioned, Christian media organizations. So sometimes we were going on like Victory Network, which is Kenneth Copeland's ministries news network.
Nathan and I had asked you to speak on why all Christians should support Israel, and even in the face of rising global anti-Semitism and antagonism, too many Christians have bought into the lie that God has washed his hands of the Jewish people.
Tragically true, Tim. Alliteration aside, the Bible could not be clearer that God has a plan for the Jewish people in the end times. As a matter of fact, you could say that they are the key to understanding God's prophetic time clock.
I couldn't agree more. And of course, we've made it very clear that we, both personally and here at Lamb and Lion Ministries, stand with Israel. There can be no doubt that is a biblically supported position, which brings us back to your presentation.
There are fewer commands that God is more emphatic about than his charge to bless the chosen descendants of Israel. Even when he disciplines them as sons, he holds accountable those who gloat over their scourgings.
We live in a day when many are actively calling for the elimination of Israel, leaving many Christians unprepared to meet the ferocity of the animosity toward Israel with biblical truth.
We also go on Daystar. I had contacts at Daystar. We had multiple appearances on there, both before and after the war.
I bring you greetings from Jerusalem, the city in which the Jewish people's hopes and prayers for peace for all of humanity have echoed throughout the ages. Stand with Israel, because Israel is not just defending itself, Israel is defending you.
Some other things we would do was I organized a pastor's delegation to go to Israel once, and specifically targeted, wanted to have multiple denominations, ethnically diverse, people from every state, and specifically focus on people who had never been before, and to try to get them, and also people who sit on prominent organizations who are really well connected, one of my contacts, Donald Bergs, he's on the board of Promise Keepers, which is a pretty large organization that has a nationwide focus. So it almost felt kind of gross because I was, sort of just collecting these people and pushing them in this direction. In her book, Power Worshippers, Catherine Stewart talks a lot about these pastors' luncheons. And that was a tactic that gets used by a lot of right-wing Christian nationalist type groups, where all these pastors get together, they talk about political issues, they talk about, we need to know how our congregations are voting and to push them to vote in a certain way. And we would just kind of piggyback on that. So sometimes we would just have the consul general come to the pastors' luncheon and give a briefing to the pastors about Israel. Obviously, after the war, we did that as well, completely focused on the war. And events like a lot of really huge pastors like Robert Jeffress, they have a weekly or bi-weekly get together of the leadership of their church, and that's hundreds of people just in the leadership. So we had the CG give a few briefings to them before. I mean, there's so much really to go off of there, but
well, let's slow down the history of it, because I just want to
yeah,
understand. Also, you also have a personal journey and trajectory that is kind of running in parallel with everything that you just said, which is,
right.
I mean, you sort of gave it away. Your losing of faith, or sort of discovering, or however you'll put it, that you're an atheist, which is kind of running on the background of this whole thing. But I have a lot of questions, I guess, about what is happening at the consulate in conversations that you were privy to or hearing. Like, did they give you a specific mission with these churches, or just strengthen the bond? It's your job to just get me in as many of these rooms as you can so I could solidify this relationship. I'm a little, there's such a strange disconnect with Christian Zionism, since I grew up with a different version of it. That's, you know, I always wonder, like, are these people kind of laughing at the Christian Zionists when they get back to the consulate? Of, you know what I mean? Like,
Some of them, yeah. I mean, it was a real mixed bag. So there was some people who made it explicitly known that this whole enterprise made them deeply uncomfortable. And I actually think that's part of why I got hired. I think that, so the first CG I worked under, Aton, and I think he met with me, and if I had to guess, I would think the ministry probably told him, you have to fill this position. He talked to me. He was like, okay, this person has some background in IR. They, are somewhat familiar with that world, and he's not like an insane wacko that thinks that really wants Armageddon to happen. Maybe this is a good choice. This is like probably the least bad person I could find to do this. I think that's probably what happened, because so Larry Huck, he's a huge figure in the Christian Zionist thing, has a mega church in DFW, New Beginnings Church. We did an event once at his church, one of these kind of, Israel pep rallies. Ted Cruz actually spoke at it. And I remember I was sitting there with the deputy CG on the way to the event, and we were kind of talking about this. And I would tell them, I was like, just so you are aware, like, these people support you because they see it as a vehicle, Israel as a kind of vehicle to bring about the end times, and what they see is like the second coming of the Messiah and the rapture and all this.
Hey everybody, this is Larry and Tiz Huck, and we want to take a moment to personally invite you to join us for a conference called One New Man, September 14th, 15th, and 16th. We've got great guests coming to minister you, to teach you, to anoint you with the presence of Almighty God. A lot of people ask me, Pastor, why the one new man? Why this conference? Well, let me share with you. One of the greatest prophecies in all the Bible says, in the very last days, right before the Messiah comes, the walls of division will be torn down, and Jew and Gentile together will begin to worship God. The power of God will be released, and then the Messiah will come. So join us. Let us personally baptize you on the high holiday of Yom Kippur.
It's a little strange. And so the deputy CG at the time, he was literally like listening to this, and he goes, these people give me the creeps. He said that probably like 1 hour before going in front of like 1,000 or however many thousands of people and saying, oh, Israel prays for peace and all this stuff. We leave you support we so much. And there was plenty of Israelis I worked with who weren't even religious. So they obviously thought, oh yeah, this is weird. And I think there was a mentality that was somewhat valid, that they see our country, we don't really have a lot of allies, and we can't really be too choosy about who supports us. When someone's offering a hand, even if it's deeply weird and has this really creepy theology behind it, we can't really refuse to take it. And then there was other people who sincerely also were themselves fanatics. Like the second CG I served under, Goad Katz, he was all about this. he wanted to make this like central to so much stuff we did. He started reading the Bible, like the Christian Bible,
Wow.
to be able to better relate to some of the people he would meet with. So like when I remember when we met with Cardinal DiNardo here, or the Council of Catholic Bishops or whatever it's called at the time, like highest ranking Catholic in the country, and he asked DiNardo, well, who's your favorite character in the Bible? And he's just like, well, Jesus, obviously, but
Classic.
anyway, yeah, he actually took it super seriously, but then also, I mean, just as a personal style, he was a political appointee. He was an advisor to Netanyahu. They were close personal
Yeah.
friends. He's the chief of staff for the Minister of Foreign Affairs now, I think. And he liked to write a lot of his own remarks, which I kind of welcome, because even at the time, even before becoming an atheist, like in 2020, I was already like, this is weird. This is creepy. Like, this is not the kind of like Christianity I grew up with as a kid. So like there was times when I would leave some of these meetings and get in my car and just be like, oh, I would like ask for God's forgiveness for like doing this. Because I was, even at that time, pretty much lying to people. So I was a liberal Christian pretending to be a conservative Christian. And eventually I was an atheist pretending to be a liberal Christian, pretending to be a conservative Christian. And like, so living, 40 hours a week in a constant state of concealment, I think is just a complete kind of mind fuck.
Yeah.
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 And that went on, and that got even more crazy when the war started.
Yeah. Well, if you think it's time, take me to, I guess, October 7th and how things really, really ramped up for you. Although even in that first that you said you sort of became an atheist in 2020, I imagine, I just want to be clear in this conversation, like there's some laughter and stuff, and this is kind of wacky, but like, it's pretty sad, right? Like, and it's wacky, but I'm saying like the people who go to mega churches, are good people there looking for something meaningful, spiritual, whatever. I think it's such a sinister thing that happens to them. And I guess that's what was really weighing on you, of like, you're writing the words for someone that you're kind of suggesting, well, certainly you stopped believing the words, but even the guy reading it really doesn't believe it. It's just this transactional, I'll bullshit to these people to get their money and to keep Israel afloat or whatever, which is just such a shitty thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's really gross. And like, I don't want to say everyone was like that, because it almost seemed like everyone involved in the Christian Zionist movement on the Christian side are pretty fanatical. Everyone involved with it on the Israeli side are either 100% cynical or 100% fanatical themselves. So like
when you say fanatical on the Israeli side, that's not the rapture version of fanatical. Or what is that? What do you mean by that?
Well, okay, so like that's a good question. So here's an example. Is like a contact of mine, Bob Odell, runs an organization called Root Source, based out of Austin. He did a lot of work in the tech world in Israel. He sees Israel as a way to bring about the second coming. But then on the Jewish side, like, so the Jews who work in Root Source or that he connects with are Orthodox Jews, and they see, oh, well, we want to support, we want all these people to move to Israel so that the Messiah comes. So one thinks it's coming back, one thinks it's coming the first time. Exactly. They would actually say that. Whether you think he's coming the first time or the second time, we all need to be together. So it's kind of like, under all this, you're like, I guess you're just going to burn this bridge when you get there. So if you're right, a third of these people convert to Christianity, and then 2/3 suffer in this tribulation for 7 years and then go to hell. And then if you're right, I guess Christianity is just total bullshit, and we now have like the new Israel that's presumably not a democracy, and I don't know.
Yeah,
even how that mythology works.
Okay,
that's kind of what it was.
Yeah.
So October 7th, to answer that part of the question, it was a super radicalizing thing for me. Like I helped coordinate raw screening footage, first for like journalists, then we did one of these for pastors, or two of them for pastors and like Christian folks. So I've seen that raw footage twice. And it's 48 minutes. You see like something like 138 people get murdered and a dog. It's extremely fucked up. Like, just to give you one picture of it, there's the one scene where a Thai farm worker been shot in the stomach and is laying on someone's kitchen floor, and this Hamas guy brings out this garden hoe and is just taking swings to this man's neck,
Yeah.
and every single swing it's Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, and it takes about 10 swings to decapitate this guy, and like Allahu Akbar, you hear the entire thing, just
Yeah.
nonstop. So, like, anyone who's sitting here, and I do think it's important, I've got plenty to critique on the Israeli side, but like, there does need to be some condemnation of Hamas that is more than just throat clearing. Like, it is truly wicked, and I think that's one of the things I really want to get across here. I think you've rightfully taken this approach where you want to be holistic, and you've had people who talk about the petrodollar and all this, or people who talk about blowback from U.S. foreign policy. And I guess I want to emphasize the power of belief and dogmatism and the role religion plays in exacerbating every single aspect of this conflict and how it is an impediment to peace. And I've come to just feel so guilty because I feel like I helped that happen. Like what I did every day for a paycheck for 40 hours a week that I knew was bullshit was feeding into this idea that, like, more religion is the answer.
Right.
That's really what's going to happen. And like, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
This whole thing was nuts.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a super radicalizing kind of moment. And for a while, like,
I'm just gonna
already
put, Brent, if you don't mind, I'm gonna put a flag there because obviously there's some I would want to respond to some of that, but let's just keep going with your story, and then we could. But it was just let's just keep take it and let's keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, it really did mess with me, and for a while I was like, I came to a point where I was convincing myself that there was this Israel fighting this war, that was this Israel that I wanted to fight the war. That where I was really focused in on some of the good talking points or things you would hear, and this was after I'd already known that I'd been lied to. Like, there was before the war, there was a moment, I'm sure you probably remember, when Shireen Akleh, the Christian American Palestinian journalist, got killed. And I remember when we were in our staff meeting talking about that before all the dust had settled, both my bosses were like, there's no way that this was like, it had to have been a stray bullet from the terrorist. And like, everything we found out, sure enough, no, it's an Israeli sniper that did. She was wearing the press vest. And then even afterwards, you see these guys harassing her as they're carrying out her coffin to bury her at a funeral.
Then as the violence escalates, the pallbearers almost drop her coffin. Mourners say this was an unprovoked attack when tensions were already high. Fatan Elwan is a close friend who was at the funeral.
We just wanted to bury our friend. That's it. I don't understand. I don't imagine. I cannot even find a right way for what kind of humanity and international law is being violated, ethically violated, emotionally violated.
You're sitting here going, like, I don't know if looking at my boss's perspective, if it's also that, they needed to think that themselves, or if they knew it was bullshit. Either way, it's nuts, and it's so twisted. And like, the more I see it, the more I think, like, I just don't think we should be involved in funding this the way we are. It is nonsensical. If someone wants to tell me that it's in the U.S.'s long-term strategic interest to support Israel, I'll hear out the case, but just don't have magical bullshit as part of it. Like, it's crazy to me that we're hearing my senator, Ted Cruz, talking to Tucker Carlson. It's like, well, we got to do this to stay on the right side of God.
Yeah.
Or the ambassador, Huckabee, who I've met at an event with Michael Evans here, where he spoke too, and now he's our ambassador there is saying, I think God saved Donald Trump from getting shot and killed because he has a special plan in this. And like this man is all about this. This is his whole focus and approach towards Israel is based on Christian theology and like
Yeah.
or mythology, I would call it. There is a reason Maria Botina sought to infiltrate the National Prayer Breakfast because everyone knows when religion's on the table, everyone's guard is down. And it's not just the fundamentalists here that are a problem, because I also, over time, when the Third Consul General started especially, we started doing outreach to a lot of like liberal Christians and other minority faith groups. And that was a lot of just a damage control move.
Yeah.
And again, because they want everything to be kumbaya and get along. And so that's the other side of my job that I don't think a lot of people would see. Like if you know anything about Israel and Christian Zionism, the John Hagees of the world, this and that. You didn't see, like, I went to plenty of mosques. I went to like Hindu temples. I went to like Christ the King Lutheran here in church in Houston, where they like have you see pride flags all over the place. Like there was trips when the CG would go to Dallas, and I would have her meet with Robert Jeffress, and then also have her meet with Neil Thomas, who's the pastor at Cathedral of Hope, which is like the biggest affirming church in our region, if not the whole country, on the same trip. Like
And the
AJC
content
would
of
send.
their conversations or meetings were like, what was it? Were you privy to like, what are they discussing at these things? Just continued support, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so when we go to like an affirming church, I go to one of these little churches, I talk about, Israel's the only place in the Middle East where it's safe to be gay. And
Yeah.
then we go to Robert Jeffress's church where he doesn't think that it should be safe to be gay in America, and we just don't mention this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very targeted on who we're talking to. Like sometimes we would like every Martin Luther King Day, we would try to get involved in a parade, and we would. So I did plenty of outreach that was specifically targeted to predominantly Black churches, or sometimes we'd do Spanish speaking churches, especially, and try to get into that world more.
Yeah. Well, let's, so I planted that flag with the sort of role of religion in Islam. Because, it's a good thing to point out. I mean, I also watched a lot of the tapes. Maybe, I don't know if I saw all the hours that you saw, or if you had access to stuff that the general population like I didn't have. But I think, if you know a bit about my background and my journey to these questions, it also sort of came through the atheist front door with the
Right.
and I still have no love lost for religion and its role in entrenching, inflaming, exacerbating is the word you used, violence. I just want to put out, and I don't think that's what the rest of our conversation will be about, but that I really think there needs to be a more holistic psychological consideration of how those things intertwine with trauma and grievance and vengeance and all these things. But I don't discount it. I mean, it's just like the quick side note.
Oh, I know you don't. Yeah.
Yeah. But just like with the Sam Harrises of the world, it's so ironic because I was convinced by his messaging post 9/11 that if we don't have an honest conversation about this, and I thought he was kind of talking about the left, but I don't know what he was talking about, that the right was going to have it for us, and they're not, and we're not going to like what they do with that conversation. So I had the same kind of worry as you of like, after 9/11 happens and George W. Bush says this has nothing to do with Islam, Islam's a religion of peace. Joe Schmo in Texas there, your neighbor who might be watching the news and sees Osama bin Laden reading the Quran a whole lot is going to be like, well, that's bullshit. I'm going to go beat the shit out of my Muslim neighbor now. That's what I wanted to avoid. Ironically, I feel like Sam himself, of course, and many of these people now have just literally become the thing that they were warning against. But that's kind of a separate conversation.
Yeah, and
you can respond. Yeah.
I mean, they also, it's 100% agree with you, and they also seem to have a willful sense of blindness when it comes to religious fanaticism on the Israeli side.
Just
I
yesterday,
barely hear them talk about it.
No, yeah, I think just yesterday, Israel Katz, I'll put it on the screen, but said he was going to rain down the 10 plagues upon the Houthis,
Oh yeah, the
including
plague of the firstborn. My
killing the
goodness.
firstborn. And it's like, and you
Yeah.
know, I even had some people commenting, being like, well, they're just being symbolic when they do it, but the other guys really mean it. It's like, anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean, and
yeah, go on.
yeah, the Israeli rhetoric on this has been genocidal from day one, and
Yeah,
made appeal to religious theology. When you had Netanyahu himself come out and this is
yeah,
like Amalek.
yeah.
This stuff is nuts. Like
Which
Amalek is an Iron Age genocide.
Yeah, which I'm just going to say, and then I want to get back into some of your story. I'm just going to say, I think as dark as all of that is, and you and I are in agreement about that aspect of it, there's some fucked up good news there that I think humans need or maybe even require a divine kind of righteous outsourcing of our morality in order to help our hand do the kind of awful things that with the hoe in the back of the neck of a Thai worker and all these awful things. But anyway, that's a different sort of psychological conversation that I don't want to dismiss, but I want to stay focused on your trajectory through these things. So I'm curious, by the time October 7th came along, clearly you were losing your faith and feeling weird about writing these things that you didn't really believe.
So that happened in 2020. Yeah.
2020. Was there a specific story about losing your faith that
I don't think I would have ever got to this point if I hadn't worked in this job.
Interesting.
It was a combination of just being constantly exposed to religious questions, to religious fundamentalism, and like spending 40 hours a week engaging with all these different people, and you're sitting here and you can't ignore this going, y'all cannot all be right. You'll make mutually incompatible claims about the nature of the universe and the future, and it just doesn't make any sense. And like, it's one thing to like sit in your house and do your thing and know like someone on the other side of the world disagrees with you fundamentally about all this stuff. It's another thing to be interacting with them constantly, and to constantly have it reassured to you, oh no, this is a serious danger. This is a serious vulnerability. I know that it is because I exploited it. I'm the one that did it.
Yeah.
Like, these aren't just accusations. These are confessions. Like
I hear you. Yeah.
I have seen how easy it is to get decent people to do bad things with religion because I've done it. I know. I've made the sausage. I don't just know how it's made.
I was just gonna underline that point you just made of the cynicism of like, well, let's just get all the Jews back to Israel and start World War III and build the temple again, and then we'll just see who's right. And you know, even if like you don't believe any of that, the cynic who thinks, oh, all these religious people are nuts, these Christian Zionists who think it's the sequel, Jesus is coming back, and then these Jewish apocalyptic people thinking the Messiah is going to come, it's going to be the first screening of the show or whatever. But if you think they're all nuts, but actually just want their support, I just want to underline how sinister I think that is to actually, as much as you evil. And I don't like religion and how it operates in the world, I think it's evil to exploit people's desire for these cosmic stories in order to propel a national project of any kind, let alone Israel, which has its own moral compromises of being a real estate project. But I was going to ask you, so 2020, you lose your faith, which was this process of chipping away and well told by you. Did you or have you in the process start to, I wonder if you even asked them this way, did you ever hear the word Palestinians in your entire sort of career up until October 7th? And when did you start to sort of understand there was another narrative about what has happened there? Yeah.
I knew that before.
Okay.
Like, I mentioned I've mostly focused on South Asia in school, but like there was two instances, one in college where a professor had us play a kind of role-playing exercise where each member of the class was a different member of the Knesset. And then he played the role of the Palestinian Authority, and we were supposed to try to put together a deal. And it didn't go much better than the real world. And then another time in graduate school, similarly, I had a professor had each some of the students, like ended up playing the role of the United States. Someone else was playing Israel. Someone else was playing the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, and then everyone else acted as journalists. And we were supposed to kind of give this briefing. It didn't go great either. And I think that was just kind of to show how intractable the problem is. But and again, like with religion, I often think that this gets ignored in a lot of the news cycle of how this operates, especially when it's the majority religion of the country it's being reported in. Like I don't think I've ever watched CNN and heard or anything like that and heard someone, you know, have like a real thorough critique of Christianity that often. And one thing I do want to, you just kind of like jogged my memory on something when you were mentioning the real estate thing and the temple. So there is an organization called the Temple Project in Israel. You've probably heard of it. So they want to get these unblemished red heifers to there's a rancher here in Texas that has provided those.
Yeah.
That I've been tracking. I track this as part of my thing. When we were doing the Hamas raw footage screenings, like and one of them in Dallas, my boss told me specifically, make sure he is not invited because that would be too weird. And I've also seen, you can probably find it online, on like at sunrise or whatever, just before October 7th, there's I guess I don't know what you call it, like a platoon or a group of Hamas things, and they specifically mention these red heifers that have gone over there. And like that, and it's just it's so weird to me that you have like this Texas cowboy thing and just like fundamentalist Islam and like that let's rebuild the temple, and they're all working like in one plot. Like Robert Jeffress, you know, he's an advisor, been an advisor to Trump, and one of their things, I think he was actually at the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem, and they put up a graphic of Jerusalem that had the mosque replaced with the third temple.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. I want to ask you about these screenings. They are what they sound like, right? Like you guys got the footage, I imagine, sent over from Israel or the IDF or whoever had the raw stuff. And then you just set up little movie theater screenings or just somewhere at the consulate, like a screening room, and it was just hours and hours and hours?
We did many of these, and I feel really bad for the current CG because she's had to watch it like 7 times.
And like how many hours of footage were you were just rolling it?
It's like 48 minutes.
48 minutes. It's like a cut. Yeah.
And like, so some of it's, you know, from doorbell cams, some of it's from traffic light cameras. Most of it is from GoPros that Hamas filmed themselves because they were proud of what they had done.
Yeah.
Like
but
there's a jubilant expression on these people's faces.
I've watched them, but I know it's just the icky subject, but they weren't showing the helicopters and the Hannibal directive and that the Israeli army.
I don't recall seeing any of that part of it. I was going to say, like, so you asked how we got it. So we did a few of these. One of them we did at the consulate building conference room. That one was from just journalists. Everyone had to sign, you know, a waiver talking about this. Everybody had to put their phones away in a separate bag. One of them we did at the Nathaniel Center, which is owned by a lady, Victoria Servati. Her husband is the CEO of Insperity. They're billionaires. This one was for a lot of like Christian and Jewish folks. They sent that one, the link to the raw footage with the password, to me on WhatsApp to screen it. Like that's how much, I guess, trust they had in me. And like that, this is something I do want to like mention. Like I feel I have a lot of conflicting emotions because there's people I worked with who I thought were really good people. I still think they are. And I don't have anything like personal against them. Like I don't have any issue with the driver at the consulate who I've talked with about like rock and roll all the time. He was a great guy. And like, I totally, I do think there's been this alarming rise in anti-Semitism, and I also think that there's a constant effort by a lot of actors in the Israeli government to just label anyone an
Yeah.
anti-Semite who critiques any aspect of it, and to constantly associate all of the world's Jews with the state of Israel. We explicitly said that in remarks. I had, at the direction of the Consul General, write that I wear two hats, one representing the people of Israel and one representing the Jewish people all over the world. And we would put that into so many speeches.
Yeah.
And I don't, when you do that, that doesn't help anything with this anti-Semitism, because
No.
idiots are gonna hear this and they're gonna go, well, you're starving children, and you represent all the world's Jews, so all the world's Jews are bad. And
Yeah.
it's creating this escalatory cycle where, and then people start to ignore this, and then when the actual scary anti-Semites come out of the woodwork, it's like a boy who cried wolf scenario, and people are taking that less seriously.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all these things are true and happening at the same time, and
Yeah.
it's very messed up.
Yeah. I mean, it's so obviously you've heard in every debate, in every argument, everyone ends up pulling out the line that the world didn't start on October 7th, but it certainly seems like, setting up a screening of all of that, you definitely wanted, there was an effort to start the conversation. It starts and ends at that day and that event, and no one should try to contextualize it. I mean, it's really, really powerful stuff, which is, and this may be a separate political conversation, but it's also, well, actually, I'm curious, you, at the beginning, you introduced yourself as sort of a useful idiot. In what ways do you view all of that being sort of used for something that, I don't know how you would put it, that you think is manipulative or has ulterior motives? I mean, I just want to, I have so many critics now since since I debated Coleman Hughes, and I have a bunch of followers now who don't like me, that I know everything. I watched the tapes too. Like, I know what happened on October 7th, and I have to remind people of this. And I've said this on many other shows now, but I'll just reiterate it on mine. Like, the reason I do the work I do is because when I was a kid, I learned about the Holocaust nonstop, and I know that it happened. And the point was to really be honest about it, that it really does happen, that it's a human phenomenon, that it's not a supernatural phenomenon, that there's no metaphysics involved, that humans are capable of doing this. And I absolutely know it happened. And it shouldn't be diminished. I just need to kind of put that out there. But obviously, like, in some alternate universe where the Palestinians actually had a state, and let alone whether you think that's a good idea or not, presumably they would have a consulate. Obviously, America would have problems with this, but in some other timeline, they have a consulate, and they had someone in your position who was screening things for the last 100 years, right? That were just as brutal and just as humiliating and just as awful and just as religiously toned, that would have ramped up the emotions in the opposite direction. And I think that's the sort of power imbalance of the PR battle, which I guess is, I mean, that's maybe I'm answering it for you, of the useful idiot. You were part of the Hasbara army unwillingly in the PR battle, but Palestine and the Palestinian narrative doesn't get to fight that on the same terms for very much a kind of, the institution that you worked for, that structure, that ability to send that information out and get it in front of people quickly. The Palestinians don't really have that, and they've been fighting for that for a very, very long time. And anyway, it's super brutal, but you could just respond to that. But it's, none of this is easy. This is one of the most icky conversations I've had in a while, but it's important.
So I've not only watched the October 7th raw footage and all these pictures, and I've heard from these hostages too, or some of their families. I've also watched plenty of stuff from the other way. I've watched the Cy Timon rape video, and I've watched, for the listeners that don't know, there's a video of Cy Timon is a prison in Israel where they've been sending people who are suspected militants from Gaza, and some of them presumably are people who are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And there is a video from the security cameras that you can watch of a group of Israeli guards picking up one of these guys and raping him with a hot iron rod. Someone died from this. This has happened to dozens of people. And the response to this from not just randos, but senior people in the Israeli government was that they should be systematizing this and doing this to everyone that they catch as like a kind of revenge. I'm sorry, like I've seen it on both sides. I've seen clear evidence that rape occurred on both sides of this conflict. And if I hear another person try to dispute otherwise, I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah. But so to bring it to your personal experience of what conversations were around you at this place, maybe after October 7th, what kind of communications you were tasked with, what was next that you wanted to say? Well, like what was coming through the door? Obviously the screenings is what it is, but as, I don't know how to put this in any other way, as it became more obvious what Israel was intending to do after October 7th, and okay, I'll just cards on the table, be cynical, using the opportunity to do what they, I think, had long wanted to do in this awful, brutal way. I'm wondering what was happening in your mind, and then if there was other people in the consulate themselves maybe feeling uncomfortable or maybe kind of rah, this is finally the moment to do, I don't know.
There was definitely some of the rah coming from people. Like I had one person who I worked with, and this woman literally said out loud at a concert, they should all be raped. She said that.
Yeah.
And then I had other people I worked with who I knew felt the same way I do. I mean, like one of the women I worked with was herself an atheist, and this is so weird because I always wanted to tell her, like, hey, I actually like agree with you. I think this is kind of nuts. I could tell she thought what my position at the consulate was crazy, and I wanted so bad to be like, I agree with you. It is crazy. Like we shouldn't be doing this. So if there was hesitancy, and I think there was in a lot of people, I think there was a fear to vocally express that because, this is how you earn a living. This is how you're putting food on the table. Do you really want to like risk that by going too far out of bounds here? And I remember towards the end of my time there, one of the things that really got to me was we're sitting there in a staff meeting, and this is after Israel said we're not letting any aid in at all. I think that was around March when that decision happened.
Yeah.
And the CG says, hey, we shouldn't say this, but I'm convinced that we can actually militarily defeat Hamas, and there's a growing consensus in the government that we can't do this. And I'm just thinking, what the hell are we still doing this for then? Like towards that last month, I could barely function. Like when I would drive to work, my hand would just be trembling like this. I really hated myself. Like there was times when I lost like 25 pounds because like it was difficult to find an appetite to eat at work when you're running like PR for a starvation campaign. Like I would go into the bathroom and I would just sometimes collapse and just like weep in there because of what I was involved with. And like I started this out on Israel's side during the war. I wanted it. I really hoped that Hamas could be defeated and that maybe we could pull out some kind of better scenario where there's a two-state solution. It's like I'm so like black-pilled on this because I don't think there's not going to be any progress on this as long as I think as Christopher Hitchens that these parties of God have a veto over peace.
Yeah. Well, we could discuss sort of the.
Sorry, that got a little more abstract there, but that's just kind of my thoughts on the big picture.
No, it's nice to know like where you, given your what you've been through, sort of how cynical and dark it is. I mean, I agree. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned Coleman Hughes. I did. If you want, I want to focus on him a little bit because I watched your
Sure.
thing there.
Yeah.
I remember I've been following him since the outbreak of this, and there was one instance where he was talking like his very simplistic view, like Israel is the good guys, and he mentioned, well, it's not an apartheid state because like one of the worst aspects of apartheid in South Africa was there was laws about who could marry who, and Israel doesn't have that.
Which is just
For those
false,
of you
right?
that don't,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
interfaith marriage is unlawful in the state of Israel. And
As
I
is
don't think
as is gay marriage, it's recognized, but you can't have
yes,
one performed there.
yeah,
Just so everyone's
there's
clear.
a whole niche industry of Greece that
Yeah.
specifically appeals to people who want to get
Yeah.
they'll recognize your marriage, but like to be like I'm sorry, people have different colored passports and it's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
don't think people realize the entire Arab Israeli population is also exempt from serving in the military along with the Orthodox,
Yeah. The
ultra
Haredi sect.
Orthodox.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and for a long time on the ministry's website, it specifically said, and this is the word phrase they use, because of dual loyalty concerns.
Yeah.
It like
Yeah.
and dual loyalty is like this classic trope of anti-Semitism that we hear about all the time in the U.S.
Well, I
But
will.
they feel comfortable using the phrase in that situation.
Yeah, well, I want to get back to your story, but since you brought up Coleman Hughes, I do like. Listen, I don't like how I handled any of that, and I'm sure I got plenty of haters. Coleman was a friend. I mean, I was really frustrated. Anyway, I don't love how any
I
of
have
that
plenty
went
of
out.
respect for the guy with a lot of other stuff, and like I only mentioned it because I know he went on a delegation to Israel, and I think I planned
Yeah,
similar delegations. Like we would do this as a group. So, and I'm wondering because once we planned a delegation that was specifically for African American people and media, and I know
yeah.
sometimes the other consulate do something similar. I'm wondering if that's the one that he went on,
I don't. Yeah, I don't know
which would
specifically.
be
I
kind of
mean, it
ironic
just.
because a lot of his career is built
Yeah,
off of let's not do this identitarian thing.
I
Let's
know.
just
I will just in case any of my haters really are watching, like I will reiterate again, like they could think whatever they want of me. I'm not coming in bad faith to these people, and I've tried very hard. I've told you some of this in private with people like Sam and Coleman, who I like as people. I've written a book with Sam's wife, and like I like these people. This isn't personal, and I tried
I do too.
really hard with them to get them to just sprinkle in a little skepticism into the Zionist narrative that I grew up with. And, it's going to play out the way it plays out. But like, listen, like that's sort of a separate failure of mine, which I take responsibility for. Even whatever, if people thought it was unfair that I did the before and after thoughts, I don't really care at this point. It's unfair, but I feel like we're in an emergency situation. I just had to get those things out. But to your story, and I guess we can, I mean, it's really fascinating. And I think your personal story, I know you're writing a book too, which is cool. And I hope it gets out there and I hope everyone reads it. Your personal journey in the background, humming through all of this must be fascinating, or is fascinating. And it must have been really difficult. I commend you a lot don't beat yourself up too much over it. I commend you a lot for sort of getting to this place and coming out with some of this stuff. And, I want to give you sort of the final word on this, just where you think it's going specifically with the Christian Southern Zionist world that I don't think does get talked about enough in this. And I guess I'm kind of putting this out there. I have more and more friends who are, I think, becoming interested in Christianity again. This is an interesting thing for two atheists talking on this conversation, that I think the polls have shown that it sort of the flee away from organized religion has actually bottomed out and it's started to tick back up, which I think has less to do with the pull of religious sort of stories themselves and actually more to do with kind of the hollowness of capitalism and the disillusionment of the world that we're building. But I think there's something interesting happening in the Christian ethos in America with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, who are all very, very strong Christians, but really turning on sort of the Israel is, we must support Israel narrative. I'm just curious if that was a concern in the consulate while you were there, that they saw that wave coming, or they were or your entire job was basically to hold that off, to try to I think what so many maybe Christians are seeing is that the stuff Israel is doing looks very un-Christian, and I feel like, you know, there's a problem there. They were trying to just basically unplug that argument for decades before it, I think, is now being plugged back in. I'm curious where it goes.
Yeah, that's a great question. In like the conservative Christianity in America, as it pertains to this issue, I would say there's kind of two camps. And there's the Andrew Wilson camp and the Douglas Wilson camp. So there's the camp that, yeah, there's a camp that deifies Israel, the Israeli government. These are the Christian Zionists. These are your John Hagees and stuff. And then there's a camp that used to be the kind of orthodox position, not with a capital O, but that is now coming back in vogue, and that's your kind of classic theologically based anti-Semitism camp. These are the people that think, like, I don't think a lot of people realize until the 1960s, the Catholic Church, for example, considered that all Jewish people were our contemporary time were responsible for the death of Christ, like, and that they should be regarded as such. That didn't change until the 1960s. The Catholic Church didn't have relations with Israel until the 90s. So that you see with these Candace Owens types folks, like, that's almost coming back in style. And I think that's seriously alarming. And the other camp is bad too. With that being said, you have seen like a steady erosion of Christianity in America for decades. Maybe it's plateaued. I'm not totally convinced of that. I think something like 1 in 6 Catholics say they don't believe in God when asked on a survey, which is pretty amazing. But yeah, I mean, I do think this is kind of a sideshow bit, and it is interesting. I think one could argue there's a sort of split where like the Catholic right-wing Catholics kind of took control of a lot of the way like we approach reproductive issues, where like that's why you see like in vitro concerns happening with the Supreme Court, and that's like the Supreme Court is dominated by Catholics, and then it's like the evangelicals kind of took the foreign policy slice of the pie, where like, okay, we're going to defer to this Christian Zionism stuff on anything pertaining to Israel and the Middle East.
Yeah. Can you just
I
tell
hope
the
that
story?
answers the question some, but...
Yeah, no, it's good. Can you just tell the story to I guess wrap it up about how you left and what that process was like of when you decided you couldn't do this anymore, and then were they afraid that you were going to speak, or they, how do they feel about you? What was that process like of leaving?
Oh, I mean, I talked about that a little bit, with coming to work, and like that whole like last month from like March, April, May, I was really not functioning. I think I was in a really messed up headspace. I felt like I couldn't get much done. I felt guilty constantly. And I knew I was eventually thinking like, I didn't have a plan or anything, but I was like, if I keep doing this, this is gonna kill me. Like I can't handle it anymore. And I didn't have any, like, I've been trying to find a job since the month after I started working here in 2016.
Yeah.
And nothing ever panned out. I still don't have a job. But I was just like, hey, I have to leave. I cannot physically do this anymore. I can't lie about myself 40 hours a day, like living in this secret, or 40 hours a week, living in this secret life, double life. I feel guilty about all this moral conflict that I'm engaged in, especially with the starvation campaign. Like this is something that completely changed it. I was like, this is just nakedly, cartoonishly evil. And then the third thing was, yeah, I mean, when those embassy workers got killed, like that was all these threats were made. There was a bomb threat once when I was at the consulate. We had to cancel multiple events because of bomb threats and arson threats. Like, so there was also like a physical safety concern. Like I was scared going into work. It was making me a more suspicious and paranoid person. And I already started writing that book. Like it started just as like a journal thing to be cathartic about this experience. And then when October 7th happened, I was like terrified that this was going to get swept up in some kind of security, like cybersecurity sweep, and I would be trapped there. I didn't know what would happen, because you can't just like walk out of the building. Um, and so I remember going into my boss's office, and I only lied by omission. Everything I told her was completely true. I was like, I'm too afraid to continue to work here. I'm not at a point where I can give you what you need, and I think I need to take like a leave of absence. And I had also made up my mind, like, I didn't want to be part of this. So some of this was I wanted to use all my vacation days and all my sick days to claw back as much money from this war machine as I could on my way out the door. And I again, like, I still felt guilty because my boss, they actually did care. Like she gave me like a hug and was like they cared about how they were sending me off. They wanted me to be fine. They cared about my like health above all. And I felt like very conflicted because I felt like I'm deceiving you and you actually care about me. But there's also this big picture of this conflict that has gotten so unbelievably messed up.
Yeah.
And like I still don't know exactly how I feel about all that.
Right.
I wish I would have left way before. I think I should have left before the war even started.
Yeah.
But you'll rationalize it to yourself all sorts of ways. You'll tell yourself, oh well, like if I wasn't doing this, somebody might be doing this who actually really was into it, and I'm just working just hard enough not to get fired, and they would be all about it, and it could be worse. Or so or you tell yourself, like, I don't have a choice because it's this or I'm unemployed, and like there's things that are worse than being unemployed. Like I'm not gonna starve to death, and there are people who actually are starving to death, and I'm helping to kind of wrap that up in a Judeo-Christian bow, and it's sickening.
I think that's an amazing place to end it. Yeah, I'll leave it there. This was great. Just thanks for sharing your story, and you're clearly still on a journey of wrapping your head around. It feels like you've been through a war room that you didn't know you were signing up with when you answered the LinkedIn ad.
A PR battle of the real war, yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed it.
No, I think people will get a lot out of it. On humanization and violence and humanizing violence, which is a difficult thing to do. I'm thinking, of course, of the story he told of the garden hoe, which I had seen things like that. I don't know if I had seen that exact action. After October 7th happened and I jumped back into this podcast and figured out how to sort of reach a new audience and get to this format, the very first conversation I had was with David Livingston Smith about dehumanization. He's someone who maybe I should have back on. But it's something that for those who have been hearing me tell the story lately, and I told it to Brandt there, is really important to me about humanizing even violence. And one of the essays I did that I'm quite proud of, that I've been recommending to people, even to people who really think I'm off my rocker or upset with me in the comments section, is the one I did called Do You Condemn Hamas? If you haven't watched it, I do recommend it a lot. And halfway through that essay, that video essay, I show a clip of a boy named Nemr, who some of you might remember or know, who's this 12-year-old boy who's in a hospital in Gaza, and he'd been shot, he'd been beaten up in some way, and he's recovering, and he's really upset, and he's sitting on this chair, and he's being interviewed. You could go see the clip. And he's crying more and more as he says these lines, but he says things like, I can't wait to grow up and become a fighter so I can stomp on his head like he stomped on mine, and whatever, push him like he pushed me, shoot him like he shot me. And he's crying, and it's awful to see this 12-year-old boy saying such things of wanting to do harm and hate and violence, and it's a terrible moment. Watch the essay for me to contextualize it. But I did see a lot of people who, of course, it's easy to humanize a 12-year-old who's saying those things, and it's much harder 6 years later if he's 18 and hiding his face, and that's kind of the point of it, and engaged in violence. But I did see a lot of people, I think, wanting to come to some sort of defense of it in some way, to say like, oh, but Nemr will just go after the person who went after him, or he'll just be targeted in some specific way that is still some sort of like rational liberation fight or something like that. And I know, like, in some weird way, we kind of want that to be true. We want that to be how people operate and how psychology operates in this, eye for an eye direct way or something of justice. And sometimes that's true, of course, but it's not how it works often. I think maybe most times. Violence and the process of radicalization, exacerbated by religion. I agree. That's where religion plays an important role. Doesn't always work that way, right? Like, the things that Brandt is describing on the October 7th tape really happened, right? And they're awful, and they're violent, and they're terrible. But that's just true. That's something we have to contend with. And I think on some deep level, we know that. And so this thing that I've wanted to talk a lot about, and doing it on other shows when I'm interviewed, is about humanizing the other and humanizing even violence. And I know people are afraid to do it, right? People are afraid to contextualize something like October 7th, especially Israel defenders, because once you start contextualizing it or learning sort of the origin stories, like I was trying to do with Coleman, the origin stories of a villain in a comic book are so captivating, because you as the reader start to think, oh, I can understand how he got there, right? Like, you want to think like, oh, I wouldn't quite get there or whatever, but I can understand how he got there. And the difference of explaining and morally justifying is a world of difference, but they're so close in our minds. You jump from explaining to justifying. So people think, well, I'm afraid people will start justifying. I'm afraid I will start justifying. So I'm not even going to start humanizing. So you're afraid of the implications of humanizing, which is justification. It doesn't have to be. It could just be explaining. And that is the kind of darkness in ourselves that we're afraid of, I think, that how easy it is to have that we all have the capacity, or how thin that line is, the capacity to end up doing really, righteous violence. And as I've said, there's sort of some messed up good news in there, that psychologically we tend to need a divine commandment. We need a sort of God to help us do these really objectively awful things. But we could see how you could get to this point, and it's kind of in all of us, and that's this capacity for darkness that I think really scares us about ourselves as human. But as I also deeply emphasize often on this show, in my writing, is that if we underestimate our capacity for dreadful violence, which is why we're afraid to humanize the other, we also underestimate our capacity for forgiveness and love, which is the part of it that we can't quite forget. And that's what I would just want to emphasize there. So to that point, it's really icky stuff to talk about October 7th and tapes like that being used as propaganda, because the violence in them is very real. But of course, it's telling that you witness 130 something deaths in those tapes, but there's something like 1,200 deaths that day. And, no one is probably ever going to be able to do the thorough investigation to know how many of those were from helicopters from the sky or tanks or whatever. And all of that is awful. All of that is like really difficult to say, because it sounds like you're diminishing these awful things that really happened. I will emphasize again a need for courageous honesty about all of these things being true, and just underlying the urgency to stop these cycles now, stop this madness now. So that's just my final piece on humanization. I'll leave it there. Again, as I always say at the end of these videos, if you made it this far, you're probably a fan. So go ahead and like and subscribe in the least. And if you're really into it and you really want to help support me and you want to share ideas, because it's mostly about me meeting you, consider becoming a member of Dilemma Podcast. It helps out a lot. It helps me do the show. And then we can hang out on the last Sunday of every month right here. So I'll leave it there. I have a couple more coming out this month that I'm excited about, and then a whole bunch scheduled for next month. So I will see you soon. Thanks.